Welcome in, Loons fans, to another edition of the Matchday preview. Jonathan Harrison here, joined once again by co-host Manny Lagos. Manny, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm like insanely excited for this show in a personal way. So obviously, our guest Tony Meola, who we're going to introduce here a little more formally. You'll introduce him, but for me, it's cool. I was thinking about driving up here, thinking about my time with Tony as a player, and then like you kind of have different pathways, and you move away and you follow somebody. And it's so cool for our audience to have someone like Tony on the show because I don't think a lot of our audience, as we get older, realize what an impact Tony's had both as a player, on the field, off the field. I think he is the grandfather, the start of our golden generation of U.S. goalkeepers. He was kind of, I think, pushed. He worked with Tim Howard. He played with Tim Howard. Certainly, I think kind of gave a pathway for some of those great goalkeepers we had for a couple decades. So, and then as a player, after we didn't play together, I still think he has one of the best MLS Cup finals, probably the only goalie MVP. I can't think of another one.
I think in the finals, first off, thanks, man. In the
Yeah, of
finals, there's
course.
been three goalkeepers. I believe Nick Raimondo got it, and Stephen Fry for that performance. I think up in
Did they
Toronto.
have more than 10 saves that you had that day?
That I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't dig that deep, man. It's a lot of research for me.
Well, where it's funny, I'm going to bring you down a notch now because last year Dane set the record with Tim Howard for 16 saves in a game. We had a Leagues Cup game against a Mexican team last year. Was it last year or 2 years ago, Jonathan?
That was last year, yeah.
Last year, yeah. So, we have a pretty darn good goalie now, starting goalie for the Canadian national team. So,
Yeah.
it's a good one. But I think the bigger thing that for the audience that I love in your kind of post-playing career is if you don't get a chance to check out Tony's shows, he's on so many broadcast shows, broadcast streams. He's one of my favorite by far announcers in the game because he's so insightful. He reads the game well. I still can't believe how opinionated you are when you're younger. You allow your guests and you allow your co-hosts to, kind of really build into their viewpoints of the game. I saw my wife today how good Tony is at this podcasting, broadcasting. He's unbelievable, and his insight into the game is.
Oh, thanks,
I,
man.
I'm biased because usually goalies, I'm like, I don't know if they're going to be great at that part of the game. And Tony's best in the business, no
We had a
doubt.
lot of time, Manny, to sit back and just look at things while you guys were doing all the running. We were just kind of checking things out, right? Like organized. I was just on another show, and thanks for having me. And we were just talking about, just had the chance on our CBS pod to interview Ivan Rakitic, right? And one of the guys done everything, right? And we were talking about sort of players, and one of the things that came up was kind of organizing things. We were just talking about like in my career, like that's kind of what kept me around for a little while because I think coaches thought like, okay, he can still play a little bit, like he can still help us in goal, but I think more importantly, he can help sort of organize things. That's what I did best. And when I look at games, um, someone asked me a while back before I did the World Cup in 2018. They're like, okay, we want to know how you look at games. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what does that mean? I watched the game like everybody else. They're like, no. You have to have a reason to do this. And I said, well, I kind of look at it as a coach, because at the time I was thinking like coaching was going to be where I was going to go, right? And I didn't think any of this would happen. And I still think there's still something left in that for me in the end. But that's how I look at it. Like I look at, and I always say the same thing. I always want to see, doesn't matter if I'm watching Minnesota United. Actually, Minnesota United is a very good example now. And I told Eric Ramsey this on a phone call. Um, when I go to the game, I want to know what are you trying to do? How do you line up? How do you organize yourself with and without the ball, right? And then what are the qualities that you guys have in Minnesota United? Obviously, they're very good on restarts, and you've got a niche over there on throw-ins. Like you found a way. So like that doesn't mean because you're doing what you want to do, that doesn't mean that you're going to win the game or lose the game. That just means like the viewer has a clear picture of what you're trying to do. And then, of course, our job is to paint the picture of how that team looks. And I think that's kind of how I watch the game, as if I'm coaching and I'm thinking about coaching. Okay, if this team is in a 5-4-1, if Minnesota's in a 5-4-1, or a 5-3-2 with two forwards tonight, like how do I break that down? Like that's what I want to know, and that's kind of what I look for. I'm not a big moments guy. I think I probably, and I don't know it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think I probably talk less than most of the announcers, only because I'm never looking at the ball. I'm always looking somewhere else to see who's moving around. Like so, and I've spoken to so many people about this over the years, as you can imagine, and everyone has a completely different way of how they look at the game. It's really, really weird, but that's kind of how I look at it. And with regards to the radios, I love. The radio and podcast stuff, I gotta be honest, I love more listening than I love talking. I do, because not because I don't want to work. I know we're on the radio, you got to talk. It's like it's part of the gig, right? Like um I just love listening to the different ways. I know if I'm working with, like, I worked years with Brian Dunny, as everyone knows him on the radio, right? Like, I know the first thing he's looking at is center back. So when I listen to him, I'm like, he has a different view of the center backs than I do, right? And I would think he says the same thing about goalkeepers when he talks to me. That doesn't mean we don't cover the whole game, but I love listening to the guys I work with and the gals I work with more than I actually like talking, because when I talk, I feel like I don't learn anything, but when I listen, I'm learning from them. That's how I look at it.
I love it. We driving in yesterday, even listened to you and Dax on the radio on the show
Yeah.
post the national team game. So fun, just so enjoyable.
Well,
Especially when
you heard that, right?
Oh yeah,
Listen, we were obviously talking about the national team. I asked him about the national team because I hadn't spoken to him prior to the show. We didn't do like a debrief before the show. We just got on air and we started talking, right? We had a rundown. And what's the first thing he talked about? He talked about the two central midfielders,
yeah,
right?
oh yeah.
Like, that's exactly where his brain went, right? Because obviously that's what he does. So that's what I'm getting at, is like, now I like listening to him. I'm like, okay, well, he just gave me a different perspective on the relationship between Roldan in that case and Tyler Adams, and how he thought both with and without the ball. So yeah, that's what that's the part I love, man.
Yeah. Well, I think your insight is great. And all the positions, by the way. Like I said, I'm not trying to be biased against goalies, but I don't know if goalies have the same perspective you have in terms of just really being able to see the whole picture. And I'm not saying I'm perfect all either, but I do like that you brought up Minnesota, which is, you're on our podcast, and we try to be honest, and we try to have a show that's, when we're playing well, if we're not, how we're doing. And I do think Minnesota has given like a deeper picture for broadcasters this year, because we have had such a clear identity that I think it's been fun for them to talk about a team that is very unique in terms of how they play, how they problem solve to win games, in a way that I don't know if the league has really ever had that much of a defensive focus that we've had. And it's been a cool journey this year. It's been fun for us, and it's also been fun, I think, for broadcasters, because sometimes it gets a little bit old if teams are just kind of play the same all the time. So I think it's been kind of a nice identity for us, and it's been nice when people call our games, because it is distinct. And what's one of the things I think our club is trying to find is the identity to win in a very competitive league. So very good, Jonathan. Where are we starting today?
Yeah, we didn't even get into the usual intros of this. Manny and Tony
Sorry
are
about
just
that,
jumping
yeah.
into the friendly conversation. No, I love it. It's awesome. It makes for great podcasting. So, as you heard there, Tony Meola, longtime goalkeeper for the U.S. men's national team, for the Kansas City Wizards, for the New York, New Jersey Metro Stars, New York Red Bulls, and longtime analyst for soccer in this country, joining the show today. We've got plenty
By the way,
to
if he
discuss.
acts nice, just remember that he's probably one of the most competitive U.S. national team players ever. It's like he won't know that by the broadcast today, but I've never met somebody so competitive.
We've got plenty to discuss today. We've got, as you guys mentioned, U.S. men's national team action, which I do want to get into, because that's usually, Tony, where we get Manny to put on his fan hat and where the emotions really come out of Manny. So I want to spend a lot of time there. We'll obviously preview Minnesota, San Diego. I do want to ask one MLS question to the resident goalkeeper, who is in the Hall of Fame, by the way, for his goalkeeping actions. FC Dallas, St. Louis City. This last weekend across MLS play. The one question I do want to ask, Tony, as a goalkeeper coming in in the middle of the match, obviously not the usual thing for a goalkeeper, but you're forced to come in like Jacob Jackson did in the 19th minute after the starting goalkeeper gets a red card. And then you go on to face what was the final tally? 41 shots on the match. What is that like from a goalkeeper's perspective? I don't know if you had anything similar to that, but that's got to be one of the tougher days for a goalkeeper in his career.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never been a third goalkeeper.
Yeah.
I'm joking. Yeah, I watched his performance. I didn't know who he was. That was his first. I mean, I knew the kid Colodi, right, who had come in, and he's replacing a goalkeeper, and he came in and did well. He didn't look. What I liked about it is he didn't look in awe. He certainly looked excited, right, in the moment. He made plays. He faced a lot of shots. I don't remember how many they had on goal, but because I did a 3 up, 3 down on Monday, and I said St. Louis's finishing was one of my downs on the weekend because of all the opportunities that they had. And yeah, but that's a tough spot to be in because, well, I think it's actually tougher, Jonathan, if you're the second goalkeeper. And what I mean by that is, so you go the whole season, and where are we, 3/4 of the way right into the season now. You go the whole season, and you're sat on the bench the whole time. Like you go to the stadium, like never thinking you're going to get in the game. You know what I mean? Like you're just, oh, here's another one of those nights. Now you always know, and everyone says, okay, you're going to be ready. Mentally, you got to be prepared to go in the game. But you just been through 25, 26 games and you haven't gotten in. You're like, tonight's another one of those nights. But when you're the third goalkeeper, you probably haven't been in the first team picture that much, right? Now you get this chance to sit on the bench, like you're freaking pumped, and you're going, man, I tonight might be the night. Like you're never hoping it happens that way, like through an injury. But so it might be a little bit more difficult if you're the second guy sitting on the bench because you've seen the picture over and over in your head 25 times where you didn't get in the game. But for for this young kid, man, he did a great job coming in. And like I said, I think the most impressive thing was probably he didn't look in awe of this at all. But he's not like a teenager. I think he's mid-20s, right? If I'm not mistaken, he's not a young guy. So just had an
Yeah, he's 25.
opportunity. He's 25. Okay, good. But he took advantage of it. And we'll see what happens moving forward for them.
Yeah, made 11 saves on the match. St. Louis ended up on the night with 14 shots on goal. So it was one of the, obviously, with Dallas down a man for most of the match, it was heavily tilted in favor of St. Louis, and they really put in their efforts to try and get past Jacob Jackson, but he stood tall on the night. Now let's jump into U.S. men's national team action. Couple of very different results, Manny. I want your thoughts coming out of this break and what you saw over the two games, just generally before we dive into both of these games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so happy that we finished the break with a great win. And I think it was I think we hit a low point after the South Korea game because we just did not play well. And those type of teams that you have a team that plays like a tempo that South Korea does, you have to kind of be ready. And I think it was a tough couple days for all of us as fans, all of us, kind of getting excited about the World Cup. And I just think it was a poor performance. And you could argue it was, maybe our disparity of quality isn't quite there. You could argue that there's a lot of drama about the national team coach, still not understanding the pool. You could argue it could be tactically. He doesn't understand how to, tactically put the players on the right place. You could argue that he doesn't understand American mentality. I think all of those are fair questions because we're getting pretty close to World Cup. So I nervously was like, well, they're all good things to talk about and push. And then we had a game where we looked good. My excitement is that it's probably the first time in a year, but it did help. It did make me feel like, you know what, there's probably only 3 or 4 real starters for the World Cup on that field. And it seemed like our coach shifted a little bit tactically, which I thought was incredibly important. We can go with that a little bit, but actually a little bit more like how Minnesota United plays, that box midfielders having 2 10s instead of 1. And I just liked the fight and the commitment. It wasn't easy. Japan had some chances. And, it was actually nice to see a goalkeeper step up too and have a really good game for us because That's a position that Tony knows well, and it's a position that is still really uncertain for the World Cup. So um, I'm happy to do the show now and talk about it as a fan because I think it's our best game in a year. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that 2-0 win over Japan was definitely a little bit more of a pick-me-up than what we saw a couple days earlier against South Korea, Tony. Where does your confidence level, I know that's kind of the thing that's been wavering with this team among the U.S. men's national team fan base, is the confidence level in what this team can do when they host the World Cup here in 10 months' time. Where does your confidence level sit after watching those two performances, specifically probably just that Japan performance to end the window?
Well, I'm the guy that was on air a couple hours after we didn't qualify for the World Cup in 2018, saying that I believed in this group for 2026. Remember, at that time, I'd been in the national team program. Well, it was 2017, so I'd been in the youth national team program for about 3.5 years at that point as an assistant coach, and I thought this group was ready for 26, and I've been on that train, through the 22 World Cup, where I actually think we did well in 22. Second youngest team. We lose to the Netherlands in the knockout round. I know it's an unpopular opinion with some, but I'm like, I look at that Netherlands side at the time, and I said, we don't have one guy on our team that would start on that Netherlands team. Not one. And I thought for that group, they excelled. I would have loved to have seen one more game out of them, but I came out of there thinking, okay, my thought process of this team being built for 2026 should still be intact. Like I should still be thinking the same thing. I'll be honest, over the last, I covered the Nations League games. I called those games. We lived through that. We lived through Copa America. I started to get discouraged a little bit about where this team was headed. The other night, and I am the guy in 2018, by the way, that was screaming to go at three in the back. Young center backs at the time. Tim Ream wasn't in the picture, we didn't think, coming out of that World Cup again. And I'm like, okay, let's go to three center backs. Why? Because we got two pieces that I think are the most difficult pieces to find when you play with three in the back. And that's two really good wing backs. We got Serginho Dest and we got Anthony Robinson. And now we got a sniff of what Alex Freeman looks like on the right-hand side, who I think has a huge upside. I don't know that he's a 2026 World Cup contributor, unless, real starter contributor type guy. And on the left, Max Arfson, who I still think maybe is a little bit short of international football. And then you throw in the ability to potentially put Timothy Weah, who, by the way, is starting at Marseille last week, or I guess it's 2 weekends ago now, as a left back, right? We've seen at Juventus as a right back and as a right wing back. So we have the important parts. I think the reluctancy has been, what do we do with our midfield? Because with that, you got to take one guy out of the middle of the field. And we were going on this premise that Yunus Musa, McKennie, and Tyler Adams were going to be this trio for a long time. And which guy leaves, out of that? I got to tell you, man, I don't know where it's going to turn out. I've been singing the praises of Christian Roldan the entire season. I've had multiple Seattle games. What they're doing in Seattle, I think, is incredible. What Brian Schmetzer's done with all of those injuries, and then what Christian Roldan has done to pick up the pieces in the middle of the field. And the other night, man, he earned his stripes for me to get another call back in October with the national team. So I feel so much like Manny. I feel so much better after seeing what I saw here, and we got a glimpse of it against South Korea. And now we've got to build on it. I don't feel like we built on, back to my conversation earlier about what teams look like. I can tell you what at least I saw and what I think they were trying to do in the Japan game. You go back and watch the Korea game, it's hard on both sides of the ball to say US was definitively trying to do X, whatever that was in that game, because it was a really poor performance.
yeah, I really like, Tony, I really like how you started talking about the arc of where we are now as a national team and how we prepare for this World Cup, because it just sparks some ideas that where we were in 2022, I think we thought we were going to have superstar players on some of the top teams in Europe, and not just role players on great teams in Europe. And I think there's a weird thing where we're still trying to come to terms with that. We do have some amazing players in Europe that are going to be our stars of the national team, but they are not. I'll give you a good example. Tyler Adams, what a workhorse. On paper, great mentality for US. He's going to fight. He's going to give you everything he's got. But the reality is he plays for Bournemouth in the Premier League, which he plays in the Premier League, but he doesn't play for Liverpool or Arsenal in the Premier League. And that's kind of where the national team is right now. Yeah, we are a little bit like Bournemouth. We're going to have some really high quality players, but the reality is we're not quite where we thought we were going to be 4 years ago to now. And so I think now is a good time to have this discussion. Like, well, how the difference is going to have to be the culture and environment. The difference is going to have to be the coaches. The difference has to be both their kind of mental preparation along with their tactical preparation. And I really like how Tony brought up, to me, if you combine Dest and Robinson in that back five, or even if essentially if you found an amazing back four, that could be some of the two best pairings in the entire World Cup. That's a real statement. That gets me excited because I agree with Tony 100% about those two positions. Those two guys on any given day can be some of the highest quality in the world in their positions. Other than that, I think it's going to be important that the group comes together and finds ways to be the best version of themselves individually and collectively. And it was just nice to see that happen on a game. And again, I know we're grasping for straws, but I needed it personally as a fan. I needed to see the coaches adapt from the game against South Korea with, like Tony said, it didn't look like an idea. Where this game, you saw some idea, and it's funny you brought up Roldan because you don't on this show. I talk about him as my favorite American MLS player by far.
Oh, really?
Just because of the arc of the work he's done year in, year out. By the end of the year, he's making sure his team is organized, that they're making good decisions. And he's at an age now where he's 30, where it's almost over athletically for him. I say that nicely because he's been so amazing. He's not the most athletic guy, but his brain and his body now are kind of right at that prime couple years where he can influence the game because he's got that. Now, I'm not sure on the international level it completely translate a little bit like Arston, where you're like, yeah, this is great in some games, but could he actually do it against, these top tier athletic teams globally? I'm not so sure, but I thought he actually calmed Adams down a little bit and got them to be a little bit more stable in terms of, hey, we're going to allow Zendejas and Pulisic to kind of be our co-number 10s. You guys go crazy. We'll make sure things are organized. And in a weird way, Roldan is, got more experience than Adams just in playing so many games. So I love that shout out as well. Yeah, and it was just important. And the number 9 right now is interesting because I think we need to shift from expecting our 9 to get goals and expecting a shift like Balogun had where he did score, but it's just more about just making sure that we've got that athleticism, holding the ball up, allowing our wingbacks to get forward. I'm not sure we necessarily need the goals, given the fact that now we maybe don't have the superstars that we thought we'd have from 4 years ago. And really where I get excited when I hear Tony and people of that generation, that's really how several iterations of the national team had to go about winning and getting to World Cups and winning games in World Cups. And so I think that's where you find a little bit of tension now with some of our kind of peers who criticize the national team because they know that's going to be a big piece of this success of this national team just because we're not there yet. We are not producing the kind of highest level players that are going to be playing for PSG and for Man City yet.
We're up against the clock a little bit with you, Tony. So I have 2 final questions before we let you go. Goalkeeping position, obviously, resident goalkeeper in the house. Where do you stand on who is potentially the goalkeeper for this team going into the World Cup? Is Matt Freese kind of locking that up right now?
Yeah, I think Matt Freese has shown now that it's his position at the moment. The one thing you can't ever discount is experience at the World Cup. And I think now with Matt Turner coming back to the Revs, I think we'll see him in camp in October, and there'll be sort of this competition. I think Pochettino just wanted to let him settle in and continue to give Matt Freese more international games because he doesn't have a lot. But experience at the World Cup is going to mean a lot, especially now when you're coming home to do it. There'll be a race for the race for the goalkeeping position is not over. And we went so many years of battling like 3 guys all the time, and it was like who was going to beat out who. Now we're just kind of looking to see, like, can we find one that is sufficient? I don't think Matt Turner's out of this race by any stretch. I'll bet that there's a Matt in goal in 2026. I just don't know which one it's going to be. But Matt Freeze, I was the one that yelled for him last year. Couldn't believe he wasn't part of an All-Star game. Couldn't believe that he wasn't part of the final three goalkeepers of the year. And I know some of those things are kind of hard to look at, but for me, he was in the top three goalkeepers last year. I interviewed him recently and talked about it, and he said, I wasn't so surprised because I hadn't played a lot of games. But now he looks and feels a much more confident goalkeeper that he's gotten this opportunity, and he should. He's done a good job to get here.
Final
Hey,
question.
one last quick question then. I was excited to see he looked, in my words I thought about today for him, he looked very dependable, which is not a bad quality for a World Cup goalie. Maybe steady. It doesn't wow me though, and that's okay. But do you have any thoughts? And I don't want to pigeonhole the goalkeeping for Tony. I want our audience to know Tony's brain is so good at every position in the field.
Mhm.
Is there any thoughts about why we're not maybe producing world-class goalies like we kind of did in an era before us?
You opened up a can of worms for me. But I had a buddy, I'll just tell this really quick story. I had a buddy text me within the last month. He was at an academy practice, an MLS academy practice, and he was doing some scouting. And he said, I'm watching the goalkeepers here. And for 45 minutes, I've watched the goalkeepers, and they haven't touched the ball with their hands once. All they're doing is working on their feet. Manny, I was if I thought I was advanced in one thing at the time that I played, I was advanced with my feet. I don't know how. I just was really good with my feet. I wish I could have played in this day and age because I think, I would have really excelled because it's such an important part of the game right now. It wasn't so important back then, but I was able to bail us out with certain things. And I'm like, I see this all the time. I hate when when someone says to me, it's two positions, and if you've listened to the radio, you probably heard this at some point. When you talk about goalkeepers and you talk about center backs, and the first thing you say is, man, they're so good with their feet. I'm like, no, 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 I don't care. I care if can the goalkeeper one make a save and can the center back first defend a fast guy that's going to run behind you and a guy that's going to battle you in the air. Like you got to be able to defend both of those types of strikers. The other stuff, it's so simple. If you want to build out of the back and your goalkeeper's okay with the ball, then simplify it for him, for me. Everybody can make a pass from the goalkeeper to the other center back and let them deal with it, right? Like simplify the game. Don't make them be part of the game. I think we did that with Matt Turner for a little bit. And then I felt like Matt Turner got into this mode where, okay, people are saying I'm not good enough. I'm going to show them. I got three options. Which one's the hardest option? I'm going to go try and play that one, right? And then you get in this groove and this rhythm. Like that's why I think, Manny, that to your point, now I could talk about this for hours, is that I just think the way training is right now, we've taken away like the most important part of the game for the goalkeepers because we want to work on the part that is now in the game. But it's still what do we look at when we look at goalkeepers? We look at most people look at numbers. I don't look at numbers. I look at like Matt Freeze when he makes the mistake against Haiti and he passes the ball to the other guy. I look at how he reacts because to think that a goalkeeper's never going to make a mistake, people ask me what my best World Cup game was ever. I say the Romania game in the Rose Bowl in '94. They're like, oh, how can you say that? You gave up a goal to the near post. I said, yeah, here I am at the World Cup at home, right? And I give up a really poor goal, but go watch how I played after the game.
I mean, do you remember that team was a worldie?
The team was unbelievable. And what I had done, I had done 1,000 times before that. And I'm like, holy cow, I reacted in the right way because we're going to get mistakes. The last thing you can do is have your goalkeeper or center back just crumble in the moment, right? The mistake is one thing. If I learned one thing from Bora Milutinovic in '94, you can't do anything about the last play, right? That's what he used to tell us all the time. What's the most important play? He used to ask everybody all the time. The next play. And back then we were like, oh man, this guy's driving us nuts. Now I realize how important that saying was, right? And that's what I look at for goalkeepers, how you react to all of these things, how you react in the moment. But we're going to have a race on our hands, I think, for the goalkeeper. By the way, before I got to run, but before I do, I'm so looking forward to calling your guys' game here.
Thank
I
you,
have
Tony.
you
Yeah.
guys in the Open Cup
Yep.
coming up here. CBS has done such a great job, I think, of covering the U.S. Open Cup, giving it studio shows, behind the scenes, the stories that they've put out have been incredible. And if you guys do get the finals, I know it's either there or Austin, right? And good luck to you guys. We will be in Minnesota, so
Awesome. That's great.
I will be taking steakhouse
I
recommendations
love it.
when I
I will
get
take
to
you to the
Minnesota.
steakhouse. Yeah, no, it's one of the biggest weeks for Minnesota professional soccer. We've
Yeah,
got
good luck
a
to you
chance to
guys.
see close to the top of the West for even dreaming about a Western Conference title, and then 4 days later we have that chance to play the championship at our home stadium for a trophy. So it's exciting. So I hope you enjoy calling the game on Wednesday. Hope we have two good
Yeah,
games
good luck to you
next
guys.
week. Thank
What
you,
a big
Tony.
night, man,
Appreciate
for
it.
the city. That's awesome. Man,
Cheers.
appreciate it, Jonathan. Thanks
Thanks,
so
Tony.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks
thank
for
you
coming on.
guys. Yeah, my pleasure.
Whether you're looking for a team outing or an office celebration, be sure to check out our group ticket opportunities at MNUFC.com. For parties of 10 or more, you can get 30% off single game tickets and avoid extra fees. Grab seats in the bowl at Allianz Field or rent a premium space with amenities and an unmatched view. Visit MNUFC.com for more information. All right, Tony Meola there. Awesome to have him. I know we've been a little peek behind the scenes for us. We've been trying to get him on the show for a while now, Manny, and
Yeah.
just felt like one of those things that felt like at times was never going to happen, but we finally made it work. We finally got our schedules aligned and had him. And as you said at the top of the show, I love listening to Tony Meola, probably one of my favorite commentators in this sport, and
No doubt.
loved having him on. Let's pick up the U.S. men's national team conversation, and we talked a little bit about the tactics of it. We saw in the second half against Korea, Mauricio Pochettino shift to a three-man back line and then obviously stick with that against Japan, and it seemed to work out against Japan pretty well. Has Pochettino found the system for him going forward with that three-man back line?
I mean, I think I would say he's found the flexibility now to look at different games and different tactical ideas that now allow him to say, I'm not going to always just do a back four. And certainly it seemed like the guys gravitated towards this. And funny enough, for me, it really opened up Zendejas and Pulisic, I thought, because now it allowed them to not take the burden of having to be just one creative guy, do all the creative work, all the defending, all the pressing. I felt there was kind of like it's so fun to talk to Minnesota fans because it reminds me of Pereira and whoever's next to him, Lode or Rosales. It feels like when you create that box midfield for teams that maybe don't have a pure 10. Again, we're going to talk about San Diego here. Dreyer is their creative engine. Everything goes through him, and he's got an ability to do it. But I think for the Japan game, I think why I'm so excited is we saw some tactical flexibility, which I think is needed not only for the coaches to win the battle to get the guys excited about how they can become the best version of themselves, but I also just think it gets the coaching staff excited about using placebos as a way to help us win against sometimes better competition. I don't think Japan or South Korea are better competition. I mean, I think if I would have said a couple years ago, I said we should definitely be better. Right now, it's probably like kind of closer to even, which is disappointing. But there was a light at the end of the tunnel with this game for me. There really was. And at the end of the day, the World Cup's coming. It's on soil. We have 9 months. Getting a game like that in, again, I still think there probably were only about 4 or 5 starters on the field. Maybe that might be extreme. But I thought it was a great first step.
Yeah, and coming out of that Japan game, it felt like after watching that 90 minutes, that felt like the most confident performance we've seen in the Mauricio Pochettino era that I could remember. It just coming out of that game, that's
maybe
the
that
best I've
Jamaica
felt about
game.
the
I know
team.
it's a little bit less competition. Yeah. Jamaica game was pretty good too, but yeah, I agree with you, Jonathan. Yeah, I really, and again, I like that Tony brought up Freeman, obviously MLS player, Orlando, a very famous dad, great wide receiver in the NFL. but his athleticism was really impressive, particularly in that late in the game when he was dead tired and he had to defend Matoma, Premier League star, which he did a great job. Obviously, the back line was tested because Japan's a good team, but I thought Ream and Richards and Blackman had a good day, and I thought Pulisic was outstanding. I thought Zendeja's goal was outstanding.
That goal was incredible.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Great service by Arston, and again, people won't talk about Balogun, but the hardest thing about maybe a center forward in kind of the higher levels, it's similar to Tani and Kelvin. It's some games it might not be about you being everything, but doing the little things to just get through the modern day soccer of pressing and closing and holding the ball up to get out of the high press. So particularly play teams of high press, I thought he embraced that role in an outstanding way. And ironically, when things opened up in the second half, he was sharp enough, smart enough with the run, and a great run by Pulisic to get the finish. So I think it's going to lead to a really fun, exciting October window because it wasn't like that come Sunday morning when we lost to South Korea.
Speaking of Balogun in that number 9 position for the U.S., I do want to ask you, because it felt like to me over the 2 games when he came on in the Korea game. Now, obviously, game states matter, and the fact that the U.S. were already down 2-0 and Korea was just sitting back defending, the U.S. attack looked a little bit more open and looked a little bit more lively when Balogun came on than Josh Sargent. Can you explain the hype and want to see Josh Sargent as that number 9 for this team? I've never understood it. I guess maybe I'm on an island by myself on that one. I get that he scores a ton of goals in the championship, but when he plays for the U.S., it's never struck me as the guy who should be that number 9 for this team.
Yeah, I mean, I listen, he's an unbelievable player. He's shown that he can play at a very, very high level in Europe. I would say it's a little bit down to unlucky. Like I said, I think South Korea is probably not the best matchup for him and the team when you have a team that's kind of playing at a tempo and high pressing, and we can't get the ball or even get the ball to his feet. We were much better at doing that for Balogun against Japan. So it's a little bit of everything. Again, I'm not as focused on Josh scoring and not scoring goals. I think it's more about how can he help the team win the game that day. And I still think he would be in the mix. I still think there is something there with how he fights in battles that you see week in and week out in the championship. But we have to acknowledge again, the challenge that we're kind of having as U.S. national team fans is we're talking about a very specific high level that we're trying to get to. And the championship is not as high of a level as international soccer at the end of the day. You could make a good argument, Arsenal and Liverpool are maybe at the highest level, that level, or even beyond it, potentially. But that's where maybe we get caught sometimes with expectation for certain guys in terms of what they can do at a level is really actually lower than the week in and week out of an international window.
Yeah. Last question on the U.S. men's national team I want to ask. Zendejas, we mentioned his goal. What an incredible volley that was, just the technique and how he played against Japan. I really liked what I saw from him. Has he done enough, do you think? I know he's been in and out of the U.S. men's national team squad. Has he done enough to earn, I guess, more call-ups and potentially lock himself into maybe the World Cup squad coming up in next summer?
I would say cautiously optimistic, but remember, if Minnesota United fans if you're watching the America game, we handled him easily. And I'm not trying to put Zendejas down, but I don't think he can run a team as a pure 10 just by himself. I don't think you can build a team around him. So I think the nice thing was that they found a system where there's kind of 2 number 10s. Yes, then he could do it. And if Pochettino looks at the World Cup roster and feels like this is one of my go-to systems, I'm all in. I would say if we're not playing the system, it becomes harder to think about where he'd be on the field personally, just because athletically he's not quite as dominant as some of our other players. So again, that's why I get excited, is because I want to make sure that the national team coach feels like he's got the tactical flexibility and the ideas or however he wants to make sure he approaches the World Cup roster, that those two are aligned in 8 or 9 months. Not right now. And certainly I think next couple windows, I think will be a little tighter with guys that he thinks now are probably in that mix to make the World Cup roster. I'm guessing his brain is going to go, I probably have about 40 guys in the pool. He's probably down to about 30 to 32 guys now. So he's definitely in that mix. He definitely could be, the guy that connects with Pulisic the best, even. There's no doubt about that. So
Yeah.
really exciting because, again, it's if you kind of combine that system with the guys you have, you get excited about all the players because they're all great players and they all have strengths and weaknesses that you want the coaching staff to bring out.
For sure. And it'll be interesting to see how this team develops over the next handful of months leading up to hosting the World Cup coming up next summer. Let's jump into Minnesota United action. That's what we're all here for mainly. And a big one, a very big week, as you said, maybe one of the biggest weeks in club history. Going up against San Diego this Saturday night, late night, 9:30 p.m. kickoff for that one. Looking forward to bringing all the action there on 1500 ESPN with Dan Terrar and myself on the call for that one. And Manny, this is a huge one. 1 versus 2 in the West. Minnesota with a chance to move within 2 points of San Diego. It feels like this is, and I don't want to build up the pressure, but there's only 4 games left in the regular season after this. If the Loons can win this, they're back in the hunt for the top of the West. If they don't find a way to win, it feels like San Diego may lock up the West.
I think you're right. I mean, I would argue maybe a point would still keep us in it, particularly with our schedule in theirs. I think
it keeps you within 5.
Yeah, I think they're finishing up with all playoff teams, so that they have a tough run in terms of just the type of teams that are probably going to be pushing to take points from them. But yeah, if they win, I think that kind of probably closes out the West, which is unbelievable. And a credit to San Diego, which means we're playing a great team. We're playing a team that has been great on the road. They've been great at home. They certainly have a different style than us in terms of how they play, but we have to give them credit. They've put themselves in this position because of what they've done on the field. I think it's going to be a great atmosphere Saturday, unbelievable environment, a huge challenge for our players and the club. But I will say, we've also been very good on the road this year. We've also dealt with some tough environments throughout the year. And I think we're one of the few teams in the league that can go into different environments and really do well. So I think it sets up a great matchup this weekend.
Yeah, and speaking on that road home record, Minnesota, as you said, very good on the road. San Diego, very good on the road. I think it's 7 MLS matches on the road. They've got a 7-match winning streak on the road away from their home stadium. But when they do play at home over the last 5 games across all competitions, they've just got 1 win. It's 1 win, 2 draws, and 2 losses for them in their last 5 at home. So this could be happy hunting grounds for the Loons, and we'll see. But as we've talked about plenty of times on this podcast over the season, Minnesota has their style. San Diego also has their style, and they're both very different. And it feels like both those styles are set up to take advantage of the other team's style.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think there's been a couple games where San Diego's actually gotten caught playing a team like us and really has been kind of hit in the counterattack, not being able to solve problems. But overall, for most of the year, for most of the teams, Dreyer and Chucky have really figured out ways to break down the team and allow their young players, particularly their young defense, to be settled into games. And so I think it's a massively important game that we impose our identity, our style. And I think things will open up. Like you said, they kind of have started to not play that well at home over the last month. And with a big crowd and a big game for them, they know what's on the line. It's going to be so important for us to kind of impose our identity and style, which I think gives us a good chance of winning the game.
So when we look at this game, what are the keys that the Loons need to, or what are the most important things the Loons need to do to find a way to get all 3 points on the road in a difficult environment?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to start with our identity, which is, we have to be organized and structured defensively. I think we've got to win the midfield battles. I thought they were one of the few teams that here really dominated us in the center of the midfield, won a lot of the 60-40s, 40-60s, 50-50s. And that just never got us settled to kind of get our shape defensively and then counterattack the way we like to. So I think it's massively important that, we dominate the midfield, especially that box 4 we play. It allows our wingbacks to get forward. But when we get settled into our defensive shape, it's really where we have to be smart about how we deal with Dreyer and with Chucky. Those 2 guys are high-level players. They just were on international break. They both had pretty good windows, I feel like. So it's going to be really important that we deal with them offensively. And again, I think over the course of the year, we've done a pretty good job on the road of doing that against certain teams. and then they tend to run out of ideas, and we really grow confidence going into the game.
For sure. I know many Loons fans obviously tracking the transfer window throughout the summer, seeing the moves that the Loons made at the transfer deadline day, are wondering, do we see any more of the new guys? We saw Dejang a couple weeks ago make his debut. Do we see Dominic Fitz make his debut coming up Saturday? What insight can you give to us? Because we've seen social media videos at practice. He's clearly with the team. So what's the possibility that we see Fitz this weekend?
Yeah,
Or
it's
the
a
other
great
end?
question. It's a great question, just from the fact that like this is not a one game at a time kind of scenario for the coaching staff to kind of pick a team for this weekend and then we'll figure it out after that. The reality is we have one of the biggest weeks in Minnesota pro sports soccer history because 4 days later,
Mm-hmm.
we are one game away from a US Open Cup championship that we played at Allianz Field. So what I'm saying is it's a really tough week for the coaches to figure out and balance how they want to use guys that are coming off an international break. It's not like we had this break and everybody could train together and we could work on tactics and the guys could be prepared. No, this is a much more challenging one. And then you throw in what you just said, some new signings that are starting to get fit, and how will they fit in? I think Fritz has been here just a little over a week, so I think there's some training sessions he's had where the coaches could say, okay, if the game goes this way or this way, it might work out. That would be my gut. Again, I'm just going off of like it's hard to just throw guys in this type of season, this type of moment. But because he's been here a little bit now, there are some opportunities for them to see and look not only this game but even the Open Cup game. How do we want these two games to go in 4 days? And then he's going to have to decide about guys who are coming off international break. Do I want to give some of those guys a rest and play a different lineup here so then I have fresh guys for Wednesday? So it's going to be a fascinating kind of tactical and kind of decision-making of 11s for this game and Wednesday that I can't quite give you the answer. I really don't know. I mean, I can say that there's some opportunity there, particularly for Fritz to play a little bit, but we have to wait and see.
You answered my next question of how do you balance these? Because as you said, just 4 days later, you have the game against Austin, which you have a chance to go on to the final. You have a chance to get a CONCACAF Champions Cup spot. I mean, that's a huge game for the Loons organization going forward. And I'm looking forward to this game, not just this Saturday, but also against Austin in the US Open Cup semifinal. We will also have the radio broadcast for that. Looking forward to calling that game with Dan Terra on 1500 ESPN. Looking forward to this game coming up next Wednesday against Austin. This is a different Austin team, it feels like, than the one we saw earlier this season, where now they've suddenly hit form, Manny. I mean, they were in action during the international break. They got a 2-1 win over Sporting Kansas City, but over their last 9 matches across MLS play, it's just one loss for them. They've really found a way, despite losing some key players in the attack and really struggling earlier this season in the attack. They found ways to get results over the past couple months, and this feels like a very informed Austin side that knows that, yes, they're in a playoff fight, but this is a chance for a trophy for them as well, and they're going to be up for it as well. This is a very big match against not the same Austin team we thought maybe we were getting when the quarterfinals happened a couple months ago.
Oh yeah, no, it's been an amazing month for them. If anybody didn't see the highlights or watch, they had a great comeback win last week. At home, they're down 1-0, and they had to get that win, and they did, to kind of really push them up, to be closer to a playoff spot for sure. Owen Wolf had a great goal in that game, by the way. So people should go watch the highlights.
He's been excellent for them this season.
He's just he keeps the ball so well, and he doesn't always get forward where he has been lately, and he's shown some serious quality. Like I said, he brought a ball down, and the composure to finish was just outstanding, really impressive. So there's no doubt that we're playing a different Austin team than we played earlier in the year. There's no doubt that, when a trophy's on the line, things become tenser and tougher. And in some ways you don't want it to be easy though. We want the best of other teams when we want to win something and get something. So I'm so excited for Wednesday because I think back to 2019, that semifinal against Portland at Allianz Field. What an amazing game. One of my favorites ever at that stadium. Mm-hmm. And the fans knew it was on the line. And you can kind of feel the momentum coming this week. I would love for us to get a win this week because I think that even just will accelerate the excitement of our fan base and of Minnesota sports. But either way, next Wednesday is going to be awesome. I mean, because again, you don't always get these opportunities to get to a final that you host and for a trophy. And like I said, we want that. That's what what we're doing this for, to win.
Right. You want to start filling up your trophy cabinet, and it would be a good spot, a good opportunity to do that going into a race for the playoffs that the Loons have put themselves in a very good spot for going into the final 5 weeks of the season. For this game coming up, obviously these two teams come in a different bit of different spots. Austin, as we said, they played during the international break. Minnesota didn't. Both teams will be away from their home grounds on Saturday. Now, one is traveling out to San Diego, the other one staying in state, taking on FC Dallas. Who does this international break benefit more? Does it benefit the Loons that they didn't have to play a game? They got to rest some players who didn't go on international break, or does it benefit Austin that they got to stay in game shape? They got to stay in game action during the week. They didn't take a week off, and they're still in, I guess they're still in game mode, not having had the last 2 weeks off.
Can I answer that next Thursday morning?
Take an
No,
easy way out.
no, I'm not taking. It's so hard. I mean, like I said, this is why people maybe don't realize how hard it is to manage a team, manage a group, manage individuals, manage minutes not only of your team but when they're on a national break, manage the fact that I think Eric and the staff would love to have a 2 week build up where maybe there was even a soft weekend game they could have played and worked on some tactics for both of these games, frankly. But the reality is that it didn't go that way. I think, if I'm being honest, it probably benefits Austin right now, the way the game went on the weekend and how they came back and won. And now they're, you just mentioned it, one of the hotter teams in the league going into our game next Wednesday. So it probably benefited them to have the game. But again, we will have some fresh legs to deal with these 3 games in 7 days if we count the fire at the back end of this next stint. But certainly I'm really just focused on the 2 games in 4 days, because those really do shape our kind of where we're going to be in the Western Conference run. And then obviously, the trophy run. So ultimately, I don't mind it for us. We probably got some guys that needed a rest that were here that's didn't have international duty. And I think it allows Eric to say, I might want to rest a guy or two this weekend who are coming back from national duty. He might do that. I don't know for sure, but like I said, that's where it becomes so hard for Eric. But he does have some options to decide how he wants to rest guys based on the fact that probably Wednesday's a little bit more important for the club.
So as a coaching, or from putting your coaching hat on, what are these training sessions like going into these big matches? How do you keep the guys focused? How do you kind of harness that energy that is clearly building up within the squad, knowing that there's an important game on Saturday, then there's a chance to go to a final just 4 days later? What's the energy like in training sessions? How do you focus that and kind of harness that going into these games?
Yeah, it's incredibly hard for the coaches because, again, you can't specifically go and start to say that I want to work with my starters on tactics, because some of your starters are gone and it's just different. And so you kind of have to do a balance of doing some of that while just making sure they're continually getting fitter and fitter, which is part of the goal of an entire year. Is you want to be as fit as possible by the end of the year. You want to get guys sharper. You want to try to start guys to kind of think about some of their individual and group habits that they don't want to lose, because it's a long 2 week break. And sometimes you can get a little complacent when you come back from a long international break, because you're kind of in a rhythm of a game every week or sometimes a game in the middle of the week. So ultimately, like I said, this becomes really hard because we probably couldn't work on as much tactics of the guys in the starting 11 both Saturday and Wednesday that you would have liked if you didn't have the international guys gone. And some teams don't have a lot of international guys, so maybe some coaches get to work on more tactics. Mm-hmm. The reality is we have a decent amount of guys gone, so it's a little bit harder for our coaching staff to decide how much tactics versus just keeping that sharpness and keeping that kind of health and fitness there.
Yeah, this is a really fun time of the year. Obviously, playoff race, but now the extended run in the U.S. Open Cup. I'm looking forward to this week. Calling both these games for you on 1500 ESPN, the Score North app, and live.scorenorth.com or live.1500ESPN.com. And obviously, you can watch Minnesota United take on San Diego on MLS Season Pass this Saturday night, 9:30 p.m. kickoff, 9 p.m. pre-match show with Dan Terra and myself on the radio side, and then coming up Wednesday on CBS Sports. Looking forward to this, Manny. A big week for the Loons. Obviously, a big weekend for MLS as well. A couple of big matches. Obviously, San Diego and Minnesota probably takes the cake, but Vancouver, Philadelphia, that's also a big one.
That's
Two top teams in their respective conferences. I'm looking forward to that one as well.
I totally agree. I think that's an outstanding matchup, and let's if we've been giving praise to San Diego, we got to give some praise to Philadelphia.
Absolutely.
What an amazing job. It looks like if they win this weekend, a little bit like San Diego, they're looking pretty good for the East as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Question for you, since we didn't get to it in the earlier portion of the show, obviously the news came out that there was suspensions for Luis Suarez and a couple other players on the Miami side and the Seattle side. Your thoughts on the punishments that came down for the fight post-match in the Leagues Cup final?
Yeah, I think we had the show right after we talked about it, right?
Yeah. We talked about what should be the suspension or the punishments. We didn't have them by that time, so now we have them.
I'll give credit where credit's due. I think the MLS had an opportunity maybe to allow CONCACAF to make their suspension and then just let it go into the air, and I don't think they did that. I think they stepped in and added games to the league, which I think was appropriate. I think there was some crying that there should have been more games. I think 3 is right. I think we're there. What was Vera had 2 games or 3 games when he spent on Boxall?
His was 3, so he missed the final 3 games of the regular season, and then he missed the final 2 games of the regular season, missed the first playoff game, and his first game back was at a Allianz Field.
There, so I would say I'm glad the league stepped up and added games. I think it was the right thing to do, and probably 3 was the appropriate number.
Yeah, it feels that at least some kind of justice was served for that. Obviously, not what you want to see after a final and a key moment for both teams, but also kind of taking away from the celebration for Seattle fans who got to see their team lift yet another trophy. Loons looking to lift their first trophy in MLS, in the MLS era, coming up in a couple weeks' time. Hopefully, we get when we're back here recording next Thursday, we're talking about a team that is within 2 points of San Diego for the top of the West, and a team that's hosting a final in the U.S. Open Cups. Hopefully, we'll have very positive vibes coming into next week. Hopefully it's not the other version of it where we're trying to pick everybody up after a disappointing week. But Manny, I'm looking forward to it. This is a massive week, a lot of pressure on the line, a lot of tense games coming up, and I'm looking forward to it. There's no better time to be a soccer fan than near the end of the season when there's a lot at stake.
Totally agree. Looking forward. Thanks, Jonathan. Let's get after it.
Absolutely looking forward to it. Loons fans, thanks for tuning in. Come back next week. Same podcast channel, and we'll recap these matches and preview what's coming up next for the Loons. Thanks to the production staff, Grace Dearson, Kyle Hayward, Evan Entler for putting this on every week. We'll talk to you next week, Loons fans.